Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new media show. I've got Rob Greenlee on top, Angelo Mandato on the bottom. He's getting his video turned on. He's calling in for the first 20 or 30 minutes of the show this morning. We're going to talk about a couple of topics, but it's good to be back, Rob. We were out.
It is. It is great to be back. We missed a couple of shows, I think.
Yeah, we were off for PodFest in Florida. Then, of course, I left, and then but you stayed for Proclaim, and we're going to
Yep.
talk about both of those events as well. So, are you jet lagged? Are you still on East Coast time now?
Yeah, right. No, I flew out here and in the morning yesterday and just went into my normal routine and got instantly acclimated. So it's force yourself into it.
Yeah. Someone was asking about the Star Cups. This is a Star Cups cup that you can reuse. This is you can get these for, I don't know. They're perfect though for Keurig machines and stuff. You just drop them in the
Yeah,
washer the next day and reuse them. So, but
it's awesome.
go ahead, Rob.
Oh no, I was just saying those cups are great. I know they're hard. They're sturdy cups. They're not paper cups. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we've got a variety of topics today, but the main reason I wanted to bring Angelo on this morning is there's been a lot of, a lot of chit chatter about
Mhm,
the recent Omny announcement,
mhm.
and of course, if you haven't announced it, Rob, you want to give the crux of the news release that they had, or it's probably more of what they said before, but if you want to talk about it, just give the crux of the article, then we'll kind of dive in.
Well, I think the big picture is that this was kind of alluded to many months ago that they were going to come out with this tracking of what's happening in iTunes around the podcast app on iTunes, being able to give it visibility to streams and to be able to see some undiscovered data that they've been able to, from a proprietary perspective, they've been able to dissect the the log files, and they're able to see the so-called 30% of all plays in the podcast app that are considered to be streams, and that somehow this is a new thing and something that really sets them apart in the market, of being able to visualize this data, and it gives a glimpse into what's happening in iTunes and things like that is kind of at its core here. And there, if you go to the article, you can actually see a graph of kind of the the listening of or the listening pattern of, I guess, that just that 30% of listening specifically just in the podcast app. And so, Todd, have I kind of explained it in a?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the crux of it, and
Yep.
they allude that it's only for the Apple Podcast app, which gets people all excited because they start asking all kinds of questions. Is there some sort of magic going on here? And
Well, yeah.
but really, and we'll get Angelo to jump in a second, and I'll have him kind of talk about this. But I want to be up front. I'm not necessarily um, saying what they're doing is not accurate.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
I'm
I would say that too. I mean,
but I
it's good. It's valuable data.
but
Um,
but I am
yeah.
but I am a little bit concerned, and we'll have to talk about this in depth on the terms they're using.
Hmm.
And I think it's good to set some perspective on what happens. But anyway, Angelo, I know you're trying to get your video working. It doesn't look like it's happening. So anyway, good morning. How are you?
Oh no, here it is.
Oh, there he is. Can you hear us now?
All right. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, perfect.
I'm trying to get a good view in the house without the light coming in from outside because
Ah,
I know that ruins the picture.
it's okay. We're we're good enough. I know you probably just heard Rob and I just start kind of talking a little bit about the Omni stuff, and I know I talked to you a little bit about it even last night. Post work hours. That I think the thing that I've always been concerned when they've made these type of comments is they refer to everything as a stream. They're measuring the stream, and
Yeah.
and I know everyone, to the general public, the word stream is basically it's used for everything, but I think what really boils down to, and at least, and we may just have to change the way we're referring to stuff, but what happens, Angela? Why don't you tell us technically what happens, the difference between a download and when someone actively plays, and how it looks different in the log files, and what's the mechanisms that we use to tell the difference for a quote unquote stream, which is actually what I call a progressive download. But go ahead.
Well, we can't tell the difference technically. When But you can do some journalization. So what happens is the download request will come in. The initial request is hits the server and it says, "Give me the entire file." When that request comes in, then the server starts returning the file, and then the app downloads it. So that would be a one request, one log entry, everything's happy. The
Yep.
problem is if you take a mobile device like my iPad here, and you start to play or download, um, it doesn't always download the entire file. It makes a decision based on how many other files you're downloading and what else is going on to then break that download into smaller chunks. It does this also when you stream play it. So um, there is no necessarily a pattern on how these files are broken up when they're being stream played, as the term that's kind of being used right now. What we use in as far as developers are concerned is we're really looking at the byte range requests. So just to explain what a byte range request is, you have a file that's 10 megs, and the device it has some logic and says, well, the internet connection here is only this fast. Let's download it in 4 chunks. So the first byte range request is going to be from zero point 0 to 2.5 megs. And then the second byte range request is from 2.5 megs and 1 byte to 5 megs, for example. So it keeps breaking breaking the large file into smaller chunks to download it. There's multiple advantages to that. One being that if, for say, the internet goes out, comes back in, and they have to restart, they don't have to restart from the beginning. It's able to just download from the last chunk and continue.
Oh, his connection. He must be on a wireless connection. We lost him.
Yeah, he's on a byte range request. He downloaded the last packet
Right.
and that played through, and he didn't get the next one, or we didn't get the next one.
Right. So, wow, he just froze.
So really, I think
Okay. Hey, Angelo, you cut out for like 40 seconds.
Oh.
So you said that basically where we lost you is you say that it's 0 to 2.5, and then go ahead.
Oh, right. So it breaks the download into those chunks. So then it'll do 2.5 megs and 1 byte to 5 megs and so on. That way, if, for say, the internet were to cut out like mine just did,
Yep.
then it would resume at the last chunk and restart doing that same chunk rather than having to start all the way at the beginning.
Yep.
And that's built into mobile devices because of the volatility that they have.
So, we've been measuring for a long time for our enterprise customers, and I'll talk a little bit about that for a while. We've been measuring, and we don't call it basically minutes listened. We call it, we talk about the percentage downloaded, because really that's, and maybe that's not even the exact right term, but it's percentage download, because that's what's really happening. The media is still, if you hit play, is still being downloaded. The media in the log file is being downloaded, even though you're playing it actively, or it downloads the whole thing. So how can you tell when we're doing our stuff for our enterprise customers, how do you break out those, can we say without a doubt that when a 50% of a file is downloaded and it stops because either the internet's quit or the person has stopped listening, can you, without a doubt, say that is a download or a stream, or is it just, or could it be both?
Right. So Well, let me use for example. I just took a show on the iPad here and I downloaded it, or I shouldn't say downloaded. I hit play, so I'm not subscribed to it.
Yep.
So then
Mhm.
it's kind of doing what the service is doing is it's looking at that particular kind of request.
Sure.
And then what I did is I went into settings and turned off Wi-Fi. And I don't have 3G or 4G service on here. So as soon as that happened, and then I went back, it was still playing. And it played for about 3 minutes until I finally paused it for this call that we're having. Um, so that means that the iPad downloaded at least 3 minutes that it didn't get to when the internet was disconnected.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, it could be more than that. It could be 5 minutes. It's probably more or less on byte size than it is on minutes on what the device buffers. But there's that buffer period that you can't count because you don't know if it was listened to or not.
Sometimes if you're on a great connection, I've noticed when you hit play on the podcast app and you are not subscribed, I mean, it just and you get the whole thing sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes like you said, you can see the progress. It doesn't get the whole file. So I think my point here is, and Rob, what we've been doing is we know that there's some trends that we see. Oftentimes we'll see a file that's sampled, a little bit of it sampled, and it doesn't start, and there's no more that happens. Maybe 500K of it is sampled, and then sometimes we see where, and again, this is strictly looking at what was delivered because of the log files, because we've restitched that data back together, and over a set period, we have to look if they've come back hours later. You can see whether or not, in that instance, they probably were actively playing. And again, I don't like to use the word stream because it's not a stream, but that's what everyone seems to want to call it these days. Um, it basically will pick up, obviously. So I think what we have to be careful of, and maybe they've got something else going on here, and I'm not saying they don't, but I don't see how they can differentiate between a live player that is not subscribed and a download from the log file. Now, could they be doing something? Is there anything they could do in the log files, Angelo, to trigger it to look differently? But the user agent's the same from Apple, right? Apple sets the user agent. You don't know if it's a download or a active play because the user agent data is exactly the same, right?
Right. As far as what we see in our logs, we see the same behavior every time. Um, it's using the same user agent for a download or play. And the one thing that I still haven't figured out yet, though, is if you play an episode and then you decide to download it, it seems to happen relatively quickly because it's already has it in the memory on the or in the storage on the device.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I haven't confirmed yet if it's still remaking new requests to the server to make sure it's still getting the same file. So it might still look like a second download, um, that I haven't confirmed. But one thing you can assume is that whether it's being stream played or downloaded and played later, you can't just make the assumption that one or the other always happens.
Right.
But you could you could though draw a conclusion that in most cases, when you see byte range requests, it's probably getting played rather than downloaded to be played later. But you can't always make that assumption because again, downloads can be interrupted and resumed, and the device internet could could dictate that the download is broken into smaller chunks from the get go.
And Rob, just so you know too, we don't, when we're looking at this, let's call it partial download or complete download, or let's use that term on our side for our enterprise customers. We don't differentiate it from an Apple device. We say this is globally what we are seeing
Yeah.
across all devices. We're seeing, 25% of the episodes or 25% of the instances where there was an interaction on that file that he got to 80% and 72% that went to 100% and and I'm just making up numbers here. 3% that only sampled the first 5% of the show. So there's, so we've never really said this, and for them to make, and this is where I really, my eyeball kind of turns sideways, is when they say that they can tell the accuracy within almost a second of when someone hits stop. I'm
I don't know, where's that data coming
where
from
is
is the
okay?
question.
How
Yeah.
okay? They must
Yeah.
either they're forcing through their server system smaller chunks, which I don't know if that's even possible. But what's your thoughts on that? Are they employing something server side to be able to get accuracy down to a second? Could they do that, Angela? I don't know. And they're
Can you
I thought you were asking Rob. So
force smaller bite-sized requests or something like that? I don't know.
no, you can't do that. But so I'm looking at one of our clients, and just to give you guys an idea of what's happening, we're looking at. I just looked at one specific episode where we see the partial range requests and obviously the completed download requests.
Hmm.
So in this particular episode, because it's only 2 minutes long, there's zero that are in that even though there were partial ranges, there was zero there were um, that were in that range of 500K of the file was downloaded to 100%. So what I'm really saying is, since it was so small, if people played it enough of it, they played the whole thing, or
so
enough of it was downloaded that it was buffered. The whole thing was buffered.
so what about a
Um,
bigger, longer show?
well, here, let me give you this data first. So I'm looking at a sample. It looks like here, if you had a total of 1,000 downloads, 300 of those were downloads where not enough was downloaded, less than 500K. And there's an overhead in ID3 and MP3 files, so you can't count any of this stuff where only part of the first part of the files downloaded and that's it. And then another uh, 300 were completely downloaded in one request, which is great. So then you were looking at that other 400 where it was broken into multiple requests, and we still see uh, almost all of that is 100%. It's or a little bit of is just a little bit below 100% where the file is downloaded. So yeah,
But
so let me grab a larger file.
yeah, a longer one. Because the 2-minute one, you can almost assume you hit play and like within 3 seconds, you've got the whole file.
Hmm.
Right, on a good connection,
Yeah,
which most people have today.
Plus, before we jump ahead,
sure.
one thing, just because you can see these byte range request packets getting downloaded off the server, that is not listened to data. I mean, they may or may not listen to that data. Just because it was downloaded doesn't mean that it was listened to. Correct?
But also, just so we're clear, sometimes you have downloads. Angela, correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes you have an actual download where it's doing it automatically. That's still chunked into byte range requests. Am I right in saying that,
Right,
Angela?
I use that example in the
Okay.
beginning when we start
Okay.
talking that
Yeah.
like the internet is not very fast. So the phone decides we're going to break this up into chunks because there is a risk of the internet going out, coming back. We don't want to have to resume all the way from the beginning.
Yep.
It also does that for acceleration purposes. So and probably if you remember in the late 90s, 2000, the first 2000 years,
Yeah.
um, one of the popular add-ons to our browsers was called a download accelerator, and it did exactly just this. It broke one large file download into many smaller chunks, and then would download them concurrently.
So,
Yeah.
what is your? Have you got something pulled up there that's a little longer
Yeah.
episode?
So this one has got much more data.
So, from
So
the
we're
so Rob, unless they're doing something server side, I don't know how they're claiming they can figure out where the stop point is within seconds.
Well, because they can't really control when that user is actually playing or not playing. They can only see when the byte range files are getting transferred,
Right. And,
right?
and so
Yeah.
oftentimes if I'm listening on a show and I
Yeah.
I don't even hit stop. I just like kind of like sometimes I just flip the app to, double click and flip the app, or I don't often
Mhm.
hit stop. Sometimes
Yeah.
I guess maybe I do, but
Well, and they can't see button action anyway.
No, they cannot see button action. And by the way, we've invited Omny on the show. They've had an open invitation to the show for a long time, and I'm sure they're going to watch us and want to come on. So, drop us an email. We happen to have you on the show, and you can explain how you're doing this so that, we can understand what magic you're doing to, be able to determine within a second. Now, they're saying they're using heuristic type of off-board processing of data to figure this out, and it's still just log data, folks. So go ahead, Angela. What's your longer show?
So yeah, and I can get you the file size here in a second. So the file size, and maybe I'm nerding out a little bit with the file size, but the file size here is, as soon as it gives me the,
He's digging deep.
Plus,
yeah. So
they
we're talking
also,
a 10.
go
Now
ahead.
we're talking a 10 meg file,
Okay,
which is like 20 minutes of recording because they're using they're doing it mono.
that's 64K.
Um, right, roughly. So we're looking at about almost 50% of all the downloads that we count, and this is after our algorithms parsing stuff out, are completely downloaded in one request.
So
Then
50% of
the
them, 100% first request.
right, and then the other 50%, we see a lot of this multi requests, the byte ranges.
Sure.
So of the byte range data, we have about 10 or a little bit more, 11% are uncountable. Not enough of the file was downloaded, so we just throw that out.
Less than 500K.
And right. And then between that 500K to 25%, or I'm sorry, I got that wrong. That's 11% is the between 500K to 25%. The stuff we don't throw out actually is not even in this
Oh,
percent.
right. You
It's
don't even.
another. Right. So actually, so if I'm looking at the uncountable stuff, that would increase it by another 50%. So if you had 100,000 downloads, there were really 150,000 downloads that would have been counted probably by a system that doesn't know better. We threw out 50,000
And here's
right there.
and just so you guys know, so you understand what Angela said about overhead in the ID3. So every time you put a graphic in your ID3 tag, so if that graphic is 380K, 400K, 500K, that's what gets served first. Is the audio file. So if something comes in samples, I'm just telling too much here. If something comes in samples a show, and we don't see more than 380, 400, 500K of the file having being downloaded. If there's no more requests beyond that,
They haven't even got to the
they
audio.
haven't got to the audio. So that
Right.
goes
And
that goes out.
And I should say that we honed in this 500K for this particular client based on their artwork averaging 250 to 300K. And there is some other overhead. So depending on if you write a lot of text in your ID3 tags, that can also increase it a little bit. But you can write a lot in 1K.
Right.
But you can't put a lot of image in 1K.
Yeah. So
No.
so go on and talk.
But I've seen some other shows where I audited to see where these ID3 tags end up in most shows, and it's all over the place. Some podcasters use the 1400 by 1400 image from iTunes, and that brings the ID3 payload well over 1 meg. And just to give you a reason why this is a bad idea, putting large images in your ID3 tags, if you're on a web player on your website and you hit play, what has to happen now is that player has to download that first meg and get past that image before it even gets to your audio. So if your listener is using like a 3G service, it's going to sit there for a good 10 or 12 seconds before it finally starts playing the audio because their internet is not that good. And if you just used a 300 by 300 version of your image in the ID3 tags, your ID3 payload would be somewhere around 200K, and maybe within a second or two, then they would finally start getting to your audio and start being able to listen to it. So that reason of itself is a good reason not to overload your ID3 tags.
All right, so let's.
So let's be really clear. Putting your ID3 tag graphic in there potentially can inflate your numbers on some platforms.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Is that an accurate assessment of what's possible here?
Especially if they're, well, yeah.
Angelo doesn't want to answer that one.
So let's
Oh,
talk. Go ahead. Let's talk.
sorry. Let me give you an example. Actually, so if
I
you
want to.
do
I
a
want
lot of
to. Before we Rob, keep that thought. But
yeah.
Okay.
Angelo, I want you to go ahead and talk about the rest of percentages on that file that you looked at.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, so if well, let's just say that we're able to count.
Okay.
So of the data that we're actually able to count, 50% are downloaded 100% with one request. That's great. But the other 50% are partial.
Yep.
So of that partial data, we have another 30% of that is almost all completely downloaded as well.
So we're up to
So
eight.
what that's telling,
Go
what's
ahead.
that?
So we're up to 80% that it was actually almost completely down, or 50% completely, 30% that was like 99% or something.
Right,
Okay.
75 to 99%. And then when we audited that, it was almost always getting to that 99%. And what we attribute that to is a situation where um, this one client anyway does ad insertion, and there's situations where the file size changes, so the client still ends up with the file, but we're not getting the. It doesn't look like it's the 100% of the file, so there is that little bit of situation. So we're basically talking about a couple bytes, maybe
Right.
200K at most
Right.
difference here. And then so that's 30%, and then another 3% is that 50 to 75% of the file is downloaded.
Mm-hmm.
Another 5% is that 25 to 50% of the file downloaded, and then that 500K to 23, I think mentioned that's about 11%. So that's let's see, 16, 19, 20. So we're pretty close to 100%. I'm roughing it with because I'm looking at actual numbers, and I don't want to give those out of this client.
Yeah. So I
So
think, Rob, unless there's something dramatically different happening in how they've got their CDN set up and that would be beyond me, but maybe they are. But I just take it on the surface, and just so everybody fully understands where we're at. The podcast app, when you actively play or stream, let's just use that word stream, and maybe that's again the word we're going to have to start using. It gives you a little bit at a time, and then when you hit stop, that buffer data is still there. Now, maybe what they're doing is later on, if that person comes back and hit play, maybe they're picking the chunk up, but normally I don't think that's the case. Who knows? But it makes you wonder how they can say they've got accuracy within a second. 10%,
Well,
I'll buy.
well, Todd, if they come back in and play it later, isn't there's a great likelihood that they haven't finished playing the last byte request, right?
Angela, when they pick up and play later, does it make a re-request for media, or does it pick off where it left off with the current chunk it has in the system?
well, the way HTTP works, we don't see that 200 completed until they download the last byte range request. And actually, that's a whole nother problem too,
Right.
in that there's a possibility where someone started hitting play and then they fast forwarded near the end, and then
Mm-hmm.
listen to the end, and then we get that particular last byte range request, and the server assumes that it was all downloaded, and it might not have been.
Right.
But that's a little deep in the weeds. I wouldn't be concerned about that myself.
But essentially, and the reason why we've never called it, this is how long a person has listened, is because
It's,
technically it's not. It's
Well,
technically
well, it's
how
hard
much
to tell. It's hard to tell,
it's
right?
technically
Because
how much of the
yeah,
file was delivered. Now you can make some
yeah,
assumptions from that.
yeah.
I can convert that into a number because I know how big the file size is and the coding rate. I can say, hey, on a 10-minute file, when they did, they got 70% of the media file downloaded. Well, I can say they listened for 7 minutes. I can say that too.
But is it actually accurate?
This is where words matter, and this is the issue I have. I don't have an issue with what they're doing. Congratulations. But I have an
Well,
issue with words. Go ahead, Angelo.
here's one issue too. It seems like in the past 4 years, there's been a mission to try to get our metrics to line up with streaming.
Yeah.
And as much as I think that's great if it's literally is streamed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you actually use like Shoutcast or some other servers to the streaming, then you know exactly where they were at when they stopped.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at download data, um, it's not quite genuine because of the example I was giving.
Yeah.
But not only that, but we can measure download data like we just did with percentages of how much it's downloaded, and you can draw the conclusion that that percentage of my media was able to be consumed, just
Yeah.
like a completed download. We know the entire episode was able to be consumed, but it's we still can't say for sure that they listened to it once, or they listened to it twice, or they even took the MP3 and shared it with a colleague. That's unfortunately the challenge with podcasting. And I mean, I understand where they're coming from. They're trying to solve a problem that a lot of people are uncomfortable with.
Sure.
But the podcasting industry for 12 years now has been completely comfortable with this concept of download and play, that it kind of doesn't help the industry.
Yeah.
So, and I think, when I get on my high horse, and it's because I understand what Angela's just told us. And unless someone can come in and say, okay, great, this is the way you're doing it, but we're doing it completely different. If they come out and say, we have found a different way to do this, and what you're saying is bunk, okay, cool. All right. Congratulations. But I think we've been doing, no one else. You guess, no, I'm the one that likes to talk publicly, and I'm the loudmouth. So, but guess, what else did I have emailing me? Half a dozen people saying, can you believe this? And, comment, 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 so I again, Omni, come on and talk to us and explain how you're doing this different, and use the terms you want to use, but we want to, and if they're using some heuristic application, or they've come up with some algorithm that's really slick, well, that's good. But again, I just know what is technically available and what comes from the podcast app. There's nothing. They're not getting no data from Apple. They don't get any play or start or fast forward button calls back. None of that happens. And oh, by the way, this is not just the podcast app. You can get this partial download data from every single app that's in existence that allows you to hit play without subscribing to a show. So it's not just the podcast app.
Well, and actually, it's not that useful just to look at the Apple Podcast app with this data. This is behavior that is going on across all the listening apps. It's far more helpful to look at your whole distribution than just one part of it. Sure, it's great to see what Apple is,
Right.
but it's not any different than listening to or seeing the data from the Overcast app. It's going to be the same situation. It's not going to be any different.
I have that data actually.
And here's something that, and while Angela's looking that up, here's something that everyone needs to think about too. Even the partial download data is really valuable. I'm not discounting its value. It's really valuable. And here's a case study. The client saw that they were losing audience share at about the 75% of the show. They were not, for those partial requests that weren't automatic downloads, they weren't getting to the end. They went in and looked at the content and found a segment within their content that they thought, I wonder if we change this. They made a change to the content, and they significantly increased the listening time. So they made some assumptions from that data based upon how much of the file was downloaded or chunked or byte served.
But it's just not really precise. It's just not really precise. Plus, in the quote from the company, they do say that they're potentially willing to release a technical document to show everyone how to do it in the hopes that it will help more in the industry.
Well,
So
I encourage them to do so.
yeah,
They, what I don't know if it was a company rep, but one of the conversations that the guy was poo-pooing IAB and saying it was my group. First of all, the IAB's been around many,
yeah,
many years before I have been, and we joined the IAB and get on the measurement committee largely to protect the podcasting space. And Rob, you were there. You knew what was going on,
oh yeah,
and it needed podcast company intervention um, in the early days, and that's all I'll say. But um, according to one of the guys at Omni, they're working with the IEB in Australia, so they should be in the working group and contributing, if they've come up with something that's exciting. But I want to know the technical details. Well, maybe it's proprietary. Maybe they don't want to share because they think they've got, or maybe they think they have something special. And one person says, well, you can roll up 100 servers and you can process this today, and it doesn't cost anything. Well, let me just explain too, to get this, why don't we give this data to our podcasters now? Number one, I need raw log data to do this. That's the number one thing. Number two, oh man, I mean, dedicated monster server to process the log data, because you're going back and forth. You're looking for those lost chunks. You're looking for the guy that's come in 18 hours later to put it back together. That is, and you're doing that per episode? I mean, per episode, per download? You're doing that. Do you know how much work that is? How much massive to restitch that all together? And maybe I'm making it sound harder than it is. Angelo can say if I'm right or wrong on that. But, we have to have dedicated resources that basically sit and hammer for hours just for one client and 300 shows. Am I wrong?
No, yeah. The amount of resources we have for our enterprise clients is about 10 times what we do for our pro statistics.
So it's not insignificant, and I think they even said in their press release they're giving this to their enterprise clients as well, and I'm sure it's a premium because it is expensive.
well, and also, I mean, let's also kind of talk about what they say at the very end of this article is the lack of consumption data has historically held podcasting back. I don't know that that's a portrayal of real accuracy. I'm not sure that not having this data at this granular level has really held the industry back.
So Rob, we got 2 points. I need to let Angelo go because I'm holding him 15 minutes beyond what I said I would. But
okay.
Angelo, did you look the Overcast data up?
Overcast data in our metrics, you mean?
Yeah, and the partials.
Yeah, how it's different or if it's not.
Well, I mean, there's actually an app called Overcast.
Right,
so,
right.
I mean, I can actually find that app in the list. Overcast.
But there's something unique about the Apple Podcast app as far as in the metrics compared to like an Overcast. Is the question.
Okay. As far as Overcast itself, as far as percentage of market share, it's not even in the sliver of 1%.
Well, we're talking about is Overcast doing something different in the consumption than the podcast app is doing from a technical standpoint?
Or is it all pretty much the same stuff?
You can't do anything on the server side to make the app do something different.
Yeah.
And actually, on the opposite token, Apple itself for the desktop and iOS app, they have some very strict rules on how your server is supposed to support head requests. And the first thing that they do before they download it is they do a head request to get the file size. So if you're manipulating that, even you could jeopardize the entire download.
So I'm assuming then, based on what you're saying, of course, I don't know if you've looked at the raw data here today, but I'm assuming then you're saying that Overcast basically consumes media, whether it's an active play or a download, and it even though it'll give the recognizing tag that it's the Overcast that's doing it, it essentially, am I right in saying that it essentially does exactly the same as the podcast app from Apple? Is that accurate?
Well, you're comparing their own app.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So we'll have to.
But I was looking at I'm looking at this particular show
Mm-hmm.
where where that actual client falls in the list, and there's other clients, 5 other clients above it in the ranking. I mean,
Okay.
we're talking the BlackBerry podcast app is double the amount of consumption.
In
Um,
this specific show. Yeah.
Yeah, I
right.
think what
And
we were
then we
talking about
have
Yeah.
is
the
how.
HTC for Android is 4 times
Yeah.
that.
So Rob, I don't think.
Zune Marketplace is
Uh,
5 times.
okay. So just for this, we're not going to get an answer to. We're not going to be able to finally answer then if the Overcast app is downloading the same way the podcast app does. We'll have to leave that on the table. And that's a
Right.
good question to
But
ask or to research. One last thing, Rob. I cut you off earlier. You had a question to ask Angelo. I told you we'd come back to, and then we'll let Angelo go unless Angelo's got something else he wants to share. But what was your question, Rob?
Well, I'm trying to think what it was now.
It was about the first. There could be. I think you were talking about with the ID3 tags, and wasn't that the?
Oh yes, about if you put a large image in your ID3 tags, does that somehow cause you to have higher numbers because the client is actually pulling that more than maybe they're pulling the audio? Is that an accurate assessment of what's happening here as people are accessing these files?
well, so and we did a analysis of this before. So the real crux of it have to do that media files have these ID3 tags in the first place, or this metadata. So if web-based players, if you're not careful on how you set up the player, could
Yeah.
download what they call that meta information, even
Hmm.
though it never actually plays the file. And depending on how smart
Yeah.
the the browser is, it could inadvertently download the first 1 meg of the file simply because there was a 500K image in there, and it needs to go beyond that before it has enough
Yeah.
information to read the ID3 tags. And
So,
so, and this
yeah.
happens if you ever load a page up in a
Hmm.
that has a podcast, and it
Hmm.
somehow detects the duration like 2 or 3 seconds later. In that case, it downloaded the first part of the file just to find that out.
Yeah.
And usually, doing that comes at a cost too for your website performance. So if you have a web page that has 10 episodes on it, and you don't have that, if you have that preloading attribute set wrong,
Can you?
it will
Hmm.
download all of those media files. And at the same time, the user loading that page will get the impression that the site is still loading.
Because
And
they're self-hosting. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Rob, you wanted to jump in. I heard you want. Go ahead.
Yeah. I guess the question gets back to, you know, so when a user clicks to play a particular episode and it has cover art in there, like you said earlier, the first part of what gets downloaded is that cover art image, and then you get to the audio. The question gets back to is there's usually probably a little bit of latency there, right, between clicking the button and when the audio plays. And I'm sure many platforms will actually count that as a play, even though they've only downloaded the cover art, right?
Well, if there's too
correct.
much
Yep.
latency, they could bounce. Right.
Correct.
Right. Yep. And so, one rule that we have in place for our statistics redirect system is that there are no players that preload the media. That way, when someone actually does hit play, we're getting that count with the
Hmm.
intent to play. Um, and furthermore, if there is preloading, we could use our enterprise system in order to detect that, and then identify where that's happening with the refer and the website data.
Hmm. So that's where I was getting to, Todd, with the whole inflated numbers is that people may not have even listened to anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's being counted as a play.
This is where years and years and years of looking at data and millions and millions and millions of trending lines. We've been. It's nothing is ever going to be absolute, but
Yeah.
it's pretty damn good from a you know, if people knew how many downloads we had to throw away, they would they would scream in horror, because there's just a lot that is not human induced, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's unfortunate, but that's just the case.
And listeners are coming in and out of this content continuously. Their phone rings, they get interrupted, they have to put their phone down for a second. I mean, there's all sorts of behavior that users have with their devices that gets in the way of accurate tracking of listening here.
Right.
And that's the other factor. I know that there are individuals in this space that absolutely hate the fact that there's any kind of variability in this data, if you know what I mean. They want it to be exact and precise and the same every time and know exactly what's happening. And there's some people in the podcasting industry that just drives bat crazy. They don't understand how that's possible, how things can be imprecise. But for some reason in some ways it is precise. It's overly precise, and that's why there's a lot unknown.
Yeah, there's organizations out there too that don't understand what's happening, and they're just they're making assumptions without even looking at their own data. There's one organization that decided that, you know what, we're going to count a download after 200K of the file was requested.
Exactly.
And then I just did a spot audit, and I looked at some of their shows, and their ID3 tags payload is somewhere around 400 to 600K.
So you know what they're doing there,
they
right?
should be around 700K or more before they count a download.
Yeah.
And
nobody's even gotten any audio yet.
Right. And if we know that in a partial, because we got this partial data that only 500K was delivered, and we're looking at that, and you know that the payload on the ID3 tag is 600, that's an automatic out. That's an automatic kill it.
Yeah.
No count it. So just so we're all continue to be clear here, I am I just call a spade, and I call it the way I see it. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. But we've been doing this so long that when someone says something, and you're going to go out and talk to reporters and make claims, and you're using terms that are technically incorrect, but within, I guess, people just don't know the difference between a progressive download and a stream. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on that.
Yeah.
But again, if they've come up with some secret sauce that is able to figure this out completely, I'll be the first to applaud them. But I question, based upon what I know on how consumption works. And again, Omny, come on. I'm happy to have you on, and we can have a friendly conversation. And same thing with reporters. Reporters, you need to ask around when someone feeds you some data. You should call a few people. Don't call me. Call Podtrac, call Libsyn, call PRX, call around. You can call me if you want. We'd be happy to talk to you.
You forgot Spreaker.
And Spreaker, I'm sorry. Call Rob.
Okay. It's okay.
But anyway, Angelo, anything to add?
No, I think we're beating the dead horse,
Yeah,
as they
yeah,
say
yeah.
now. But there's so much in this episode. I think a lot of people are gonna open their eyes when they start thinking about this stuff. But I'll leave you with this. Just with what we're seeing, 70 to 80% of these files, even when they see the byte range request, are getting nearly completed downloads. So we're only arguing about this partial data for about 20 to 30% of the consumption.
Right, which they alluded to in their article. But that's
Oh.
So I guess then the key is, how are they getting it down to the second? If they change that to 10%, maybe I'm a little more okay. I can see that. But again, I can start calling my stuff a stream. I think that's what we should do. We should start calling our stuff a stream and percentage of listen, because no one knows the difference.
It's called time spent listening.
Right, and actually we could do that, but then we have to disclose a margin of error.
Right,
and the margin
That's
of error
right.
is
You
going to
do
be
it
based
totally.
on taking random files like I just did on this thing, and disconnected the Wi-Fi and then seeing how long it goes.
Right, and it depends on
Yeah, and that's another question for Omni too. Are they disclosing a margin of error here?
Good question. Angelo,
Yeah.
thanks. I know you're busy getting ready to. Angelo's is buying a new house, so he's in the middle of a house transition, so he's busy. So
Ah,
thanks, Angelo,
congratulations.
A,
That's great.
a new used house, but yeah,
and
not a new house.
New to you.
and
That's all that
I know
matters.
many of you are going to maybe have questions for Angelo. Please email me. I'll buffer those to him. I've got him very busy, and if you load him up with 50 emails, I can help appease the load. So just send them to me, Todd@blueberry.com, if you have questions to Angelo. And anyway, so Angelo, thanks. We'll see you on the next go around here.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Take care.
See ya.
Okay. So
Wowza, right?
yeah.
It's good to kind of look at that from a more technical level. I think we did an okay job of explaining it where people can understand this stuff, but you're definitely in the weeds when you start looking at this stuff
Right.
at a granular level. And it's like you said, terms are important.
Yep.
And unless you really understand what some of these terms mean, it can be confusing. And
And
these
and
these
Rob,
things are difficult.
I had a room full of technical experts where we had to put this up on a visual display and
Yeah.
break it down from line by line. Were you at that meeting? And
No, I wasn't.
had to break it down line by line to make them understand their own tech
Yeah.
and make them go, oh, So sometimes even the experts don't fully understand it. It's in the scheme of things, it's not that complicated. You just need to know what you're looking for. But if they've done some secret juice, some secret sauce or something, bring it on. If they've changed the way they're delivering media, who knows? That might be the case. But
Yeah.
every
We just
CD,
don't know. We just don't know. What we do know is what they've said,
right?
and we can look at it and understand it through the filter of our understanding of how this works from a technical perspective. And I don't think there's anybody better to talk to about this than Angelo, to get it pulled out and understood. We can only explain it in the simplest terms, but in some ways these are complex relationships that these clients have with the servers, and knowing what data is there, what data is possible, what data is correlatable, that's the devil in the weeds kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. You just um, I mean, you have to talk to somebody that really is in there looking at that stuff, and most people aren't in there looking at this stuff.
Right. And my only argument is terms, not features. Terms
Yeah,
and back your claims up with, I could never make the claim that we can track to the second. Never.
yeah.
Not in the current way we're, looking at the CDNs we use, and we have a variety of clients that use a variety of CDNs. So they all report data back in, the Apache log format a certain way, and unless they've tricked something, I don't know. But okay. Anyway,
Well,
no,
even in the shoutcast streams tracking, they typically only track down to the minute.
right.
So yeah,
And if they're serving their media via Shoutcast server,
but they're not.
then it's a whole different story,
It
right?
is. That's truly stringing that MP3 out,
Right. That's that's
on
that
a byte basis.
that's a
Yeah,
whole different story. I'll say, yep, you sure can. You know.
yeah, yeah.
Um.
But that's not what we're talking about here. There's
Well,
no streaming going to Apple's podcast apps.
they did use the word streaming, so
Well, honestly, to be fair, Apple uses that term too.
yeah, I know.
If you look in their site
Yeah.
managers for networks, they break it out there too. But the difference is that they can actually
See
look
the.
at the click action on the
Mm-hmm.
player
Right.
buttons.
Right.
That's the difference. Um, and there's no way that any of us can see that data.
So in the end, I'm just call a spade, and if I'm wrong, I'm willing to say I'm wrong, and we'll move forward. But prove me wrong. Okay. Let's move on.
Oh, okay.
PodFest. Pod,
PodFest.
yeah. PodFest
Yeah.
folks, hi. Welcome. I know you're listening to hear our deep analysis of the event.
Yeah, I think we lost some people though.
Did we? Yeah, we killed them at the beginning with the technical stuff, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
definitely.
we'll have to see where we at in the show. We're at about the 55-minute mark. Boy, oh boy. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we went in the weeds. Sorry on the data.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's been a hot topic. The other one was, so I had a hot topic, but Podfest. I'll just start with give my kind of run through. Growing show, regional, largely mostly folks from Florida, but a huge number of new podcasters, the 80% maybe.
Yeah.
I talked
What's a
to
part of the country that hasn't really had a podcasting event for people to
no,
come out to?
no.
Yeah.
So a lot of brand new faces. You know, there was a few of the regulars there, but like 80% of the folks, what's your show? And either they were like under 10 episodes, or they were like in this formative stage, or they were just
Yeah.
getting ready to launch.
Yeah.
So, for you and I, for business perspective, that was awesome. Be
Yeah,
able
it's a great show.
to hand out, basically, it was us at Blueberry. There was Podbean that were right next to us. There was Spreaker. You were right behind us, and Libsyn was there. So
Yep.
4 of us competing for 250 new customers. So if we all get 60 each, that was a successful show.
There you go. There you go. That's true. But it does actually really point to how all of us view Podfest as a up and coming event.
Yeah.
One that maybe over the next couple of years could be a much more significant contributor to building community and building bringing in new podcasters into the fold. So
To be fair, I had basically went back and looked through my emails to get the breakdown of how many new podcasters, at least said they were new, that went to a podcast movement, and they had about 300 last year from their event, a little over 300 that self-identified as brand new podcasters. So they're out there. But when you had a event with 1,500 people versus event with 250 to 325 is my guess at Podfest. It's a lot more condensed, and you see all those new folks a lot more than maybe I would have recognized it at Podcast Movement. But both events are seeing a good influx of new people. But one thing that I was going through the speaker list, and one thing I've always tried to do is I say, do I know who this person is? And I think of the speakers that were there, I probably knew 10 or 12 that I actually knew who they were.
mhm.
So there was a lineup of a lot of folks that I've never heard from before. And I just heard, too, that Dan said they got a massive number of submissions for Podcast Movement for speaking. They're going to have a hard time busting through that. But the format was a little different. And I guess and I will say, and this is nothing against the organizers, because they did a great job, but one challenging thing I had, and I feel a little bad, it's because it was something I was involved in. I didn't know I was going to be going up and actually talking about Blueberry and what we do from an advertising standpoint. So they had rep from Podbean, a rep from Blog Talk Radio, and me. They started the 3 of us out, and they started with Blog Talk, and he kind of went through their system, and then I basically kind of, I basically said I don't believe in programmatic, and some people said that I was a little rough on the Blog Talk guy. In retrospect, I probably was. But the problem is he didn't have enough time to come back and rebut me. He didn't have to come back. He didn't have an opportunity to come back and say, well, Todd, I think you're wrong because of this, this, and this. He didn't have time to do this. So I actually felt bad in retrospect, because there really wasn't a lot of dialogue. We kind of got like to say our piece. I said my piece, Podbean said their piece, and then we were kind of like escorted off the stage. And so I would recommend, and guys, Chris and the team, next year if you do that again, definitely allow some time for some crisscross, because if I've said something that upsets someone and they don't agree with it, I want them to be able to rebut and call me out on it. I had
Well,
no
that's
idea.
yeah, and that's why it's probably important to have all the panelists up there at one time instead of having it kind of like a, you know, come on up kind of a
Yeah,
approach, which is what he did. He had, one came up and then he had another one come up and then those left, those panelists left, and then he called up a couple more,
right,
is and
right.
it
So,
and that type of format doesn't really lend itself towards really any kind of debate or conversation.
and I apologize to the Blog Talk rate. The gentleman was on the panel, had to leave, and I talked to Podvader, who, by the way, I'm going to credit where credit's due. He gave me an awesome idea for the podcast awards. I'll share it later on what he gave me an idea for, so he'll get full credit for it. But, I apologize. So I said, tell him I'm sorry. I just didn't know that it. In me, I'm just blunt. So people aren't used to being around me. That has a negative effect on people sometimes.
Well, we've been pretty blunt about programmatic on this show over the
Right,
years, so
right. So it's
yeah,
nothing new.
yeah,
And I
for us.
I basically said at the end, I'm not discounting that it could be, I'm planning for it. I'm not ready
Yeah.
to sacrifice CPMs at this point. And I know some
Yeah,
people,
I think Todd, you and I both agree that programmatic is coming
right,
and
right.
it's going to be part of our space,
Yeah.
and we have to just accept that fact and try and work as hard as we can to minimize the damage.
I didn't get to sit on
Yeah.
any other panels, Rob, but what you were in doing some live streaming with Spreaker, doing Spreaker Live. How was some of the other panels you got to sit in on?
Well, I didn't actually sit on in very many panels. Actually, I moderated one
Oh,
of the panels
okay.
during the session. That was pretty much my content contribution. I was involved in pulling together a panel on geolocal podcasting.
Mm,
So we pulled in some podcasters, a husband and wife team from Miami and Lost in Williamsburg podcast. The host for that show and had them come in and talk about their success that they found and building a show around a local community or a city around a topic that many people on a local and national level have passion for,
mm-hmm.
and that now more than ever, it's an opportunity to do that kind of a show these days as the podcasting space grows and the listenership base is continuing to grow. Local communities based content could be an opportunity for those that want to produce content that caters to that and are willing to work in the community to build awareness. And that was really the focus of the panel.
Gotcha. Um, I guess the only other thing I could comment on the event, and this is something Rob, you and I have talked about for many, many years, is that organizers need to um, be uh, manage and plan their after-hour parties, and make sure that the hotel knows what's coming at them, or if they have a venue somewhere else. A lot of people came up to the venue at the bar, and they were 10 deep trying to get a drink, and some people just gave up and left. So, as an organizer, when you're talking with the venue, you make them understand that 300 people or 350 people are potentially going to impact your bar at a certain time, so that they know to have enough wait staff on, and then make a concerted effort to make sure everyone knows that's where we're all going next for networking. What I found and I think maybe this is a newbie thing, is I found mostly the old timers at the bar hanging out and networking. It was everyone that I knew, pretty much. So a lot of the new folks that maybe didn't know that this was a good event to do networking didn't go. So my only advice to Chris and the team is your evening events, and get that kind of consolidated up, and make sure that if you have it somewhere where there's music, that it's not loud and we can network and talk, but make sure the drinks keep flowing, because if not, people will go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. And how really important those after hours
Oh,
events really are.
super
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, that's where a lot of the value comes from, and going to those events. So, is being able to meet other people that you didn't get to meet during the day because you were in sessions or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Um,
working booths like us.
yeah. Another thing too, the venue the first day was brutal. 100 degrees in that room.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hot. Day 2 wasn't as bad. Day 3 was better, but it was just sweltering. Maybe it wasn't, and actually in the meeting rooms it was freezing, but in the out where the vendors were, we were all like fanning ourselves, and
Well,
so
I mean, we haven't even talked about the NRB yet.
yeah,
That's a whole nother discussion. Yeah.
yeah, but I think they can have some tweaks, and I know that their big thing at Podfest was to have people speak that maybe don't get to speak on a national stage. But I think what that also does is it may impact you a little bit. There was, I think you have to bring in people that have a big scope look at the space a little more. There's a fine balance there, and I think it was a little bit too heavy. This is my opinion, just looking at the speaker list of people that, because and this is me personally, and maybe folks that are new don't care because they think everyone's an expert. I value a conference value on, all right, who's going to be speaking and what value are they going to bring to me as an attendee. And if someone has regional, not as a regional person, maybe that's okay. But again, when I went through that list and saw who was speaking, I was like, I don't know who these folks are. I don't know what value they bring to the table. And sure, maybe you're going to listen, but from a potential attendee, to someone that would want to come from out of state to this event, that might limit the number of people that come from exterior states. And I know Chris may take some exception to that, but that's kind of at least my perspective when I'm looking at events. I don't know, Rob, how do you see that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think an example of it, I think, is the selection for who gave the State of Podcasting panel.
Oh,
Gabe Hobbs, who basically just got up there and put together a bunch of slides that showed data from the Edison Research folks and Bridge Ratings. And it's not because Gabe Hobbs is really any kind of podcasting expert. He came from broadcast radio, Clear Channel.
I tried to share some stuff with him the day before his session. I showed him some data, and he kind of dismissed it. I think maybe he had his slides already done. But
Yeah.
what really blew me away, and I didn't find about it until later, because someone came up to me and said, "Hey, by the way, did you hear about this?" And I was like, "What?" And there was a comment made in his session that I was astounded. You can go back to my Twitter feed at Geek News and you can find it. I won't even say it during the show. It was incredibly inappropriate.
Yeah, it was pretty offensive.
It was offensive
to women, to podcast stats, the whole works, right?
In the remark I said to the person that showed me the quote, if I had said that, Rob, I would not be a part of Blueberry anymore. I'd be done. Or there would have been major hell to pay, and I would be sent to sensitivity school, and I don't think I could survive that as a company director.
I mean, I think we can probably tease them a little bit on this without getting into too much explicit.
Go ahead.
But he basically made an analogy between a prostitute and podcast statistics.
And well, I'll just go on to say it. Essentially, when you get them on the sheets, you can do anything you want with them. Just like, what?
Yeah,
And he said
exactly.
he prefaced it before he said it. This may offend someone. If you have to say that,
Don't say it.
don't say it.
Yeah.
Don't say it. I saw him. I was the evening after. Didn't see him the day after the comment, but I was um he must have gotten some feedback from my tweet because I he was at a different bar by himself, and he wouldn't even acknowledge me, obviously. But I just
Yeah.
it's inappropriate. So, um, and it's completely out of the control of the show organizer when someone says some stuff like that. But I brought it to the attention of the show organizer the next day, so they understand, so they know what is said in case they missed it. But
Yeah.
and I would
they can make a different choice next year.
and if I said something like that, I would expect the same ramifications. And
Yeah, because I don't think you want somebody up on stage that could drop a bomb like that.
well, when you offend 50, at least in a minimum 50% of the people in the room, we live in a time where that stuff is just not tolerated anymore.
Well, plus just the implication that that he can manipulate the data, the podcast statistics any way he wants to, kind of also implies a whole nother level of distrust and
So I don't want to go.
manipulation. Yeah,
I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this. It's just one person making one comment,
yeah,
and I don't want it to shed badly on the whole event because it was a good event,
yeah.
and we had a good time and got to meet a lot of great new people. And
But it does give a little bit of glimpse into how certain parts of the radio space can, be a little rough. So.
yeah, I agree. Because this is not the first comment that's been made by a radio guy that is, you know, a, an old school radio guy that's gotten some big eyes. So the good old boys days are over.
Yeah.
There was a large percentage of women that was at this event too. So, and very happy to see that. And it was pretty diverse as well too.
Yeah.
So, but most of
And
the folks,
all those women were pretty offended by it. So.
but talked to a lot of folks from all over the state.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them were drive-ins that came in. Obviously big fans of Chris and
Yeah.
what the rest of the team there does. So it's a lot of work. A lot of work to pull off an event like that. Massive amount of work. What'd you think of the film?
I thought the film was done well. I thought the cinematography of it was very well done. I
Yeah.
thought that the visuals and how he presented different different locales and different areas in the production was very very well done.
Nearly impossible to get unless you had got millions of dollars of budget. It's very impossible to get a much broader stroke than they did.
Yeah.
But I think the topics they picked, except for one, there was one a little topic that was a little. I was kind of like, wow. I just didn't know
Yeah.
about the show to begin with. I think it was more shock factor or anything else. But they were editing right up until like the hour before they premiered it.
Oh, and it's still
And
not done.
it's not
Yeah.
done. So
Mm.
they've got a lot of audio mastering to do
Yeah.
on the file or on the. But I would expect in a couple months they'll probably have this thing ready packaged up. It's called the Messengers, and they did a nice job. So those that crowdfunded on it, I think, were pretty happy. So
Mhm.
I heard about it late in the game on what was actually going on. So it was, he did get a lot of regional support, some national support too. But it was, I'm glad that they did did a nice job on it.
I think it was mostly an East Coast production.
Right. Well, the other one was a West Coast production, so
That's
we've
right.
had
I
one
guess
from
it's
East
only
and one
fair.
from West. You
Yeah, the other one that we're talking about is the one that was focused on the comedians done by the LA PodFest
Yeah.
folks. Yeah.
So, if I had a big fat check or someone that could come in and write $1 million or $2 million to do and that probably wouldn't even cover it, to do a
Mhm.
full on documentary, and I don't think it could do it in one episode. It'd take it 10 different episodes to to cover it all. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, good job. And it was about 34, 35 minutes. So I thought it was going to be a little longer, but again, they're still editing and they got a lot to add. So I assume they have a lot to add. I don't know.
Well, and certainly Florida is a great place to have an event too.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
warm, you know, lots of sunshine,
yep. Humidity.
crocodiles.
No,
What else
we're
in
we
Disney
were
World
we're a
right
little
there?
we're
What else do you need?
yeah, it was good. The traffic sucked. Oh my God, Orlando, never seen. It's like Honolulu. I go to the mainland to not be in traffic, but man, Orlando's horrible. But I did get to see my daughter, hung out with her and her fiance in a wedding dress, and it was fun. So it was good. But Rob, I basically we did a 2-day meeting with my team. We locked ourselves in a villa at the same event that the PodFest was held at, and we crunched out a stack of stuff that we need to be doing, and a stack of stuff that's still left over from last year, and are moving forward swiftly on that agenda. But then Tuesday afternoon, I guess, I don't know what, Monday afternoon, we went over to and ran into you guys at Proclaim, setting up
Mhm.
the booth. I bugged out Tuesday morning, but tell us, what was your aspect of Proclaim this year?
Well, it was a little different than last year. I also exhibited at last year's event in Nashville, and it's a pretty good size event. You're talking thousands of people at that event versus
Right.
hundreds at the Podfest. But so it's very focused on faith-based podcasters, and or not necessarily podcasters. Most of them are media creators, either radio, audio, or video and television is really the focus of that event. Podcasting is still kind of a glimmer in some of them's eye,
Mm-hmm.
um, but most there are not really familiar with podcasting, and a lot of them are a little more technically challenged. They're older generation folks, so they don't really understand technology that well. So you spend a lot of time at that event sharing very basic concepts around what this medium is and how they can take what they're doing presently and extend it over to on-demand audio, because a lot of them are just thinking radio and video and television. So there's a lot of education that goes on at that event, but it is reaching a genre in podcasting that's quite large. It's the largest number of shows, faith-based podcasters in the space today. It's been
Six.
that way for many years.
Yeah, I think lifetime about 60,000.
Which is a big number of shows.
Yeah.
And I believe, just based on seeing people at this conference, that number is only going to grow.
One thing that Angelo told me was that because the session rooms were in a completely different
Oh,
area than the
yeah.
exhibitor hall, that the
Yep.
traffic was really down.
Oh, it was. Yeah. And a lot of other people at the event felt that way as well. At Nashville last year, the exhibition and the conference areas were much more aligned with each other in the same area. Plus, the food area was like right across from the exhibition room, so
It,
it was much easier for people to go get lunch and then stop by the exhibition afterwards. Where at this event, things were much more spread out.
yeah, they're going back to Nashville next year, so I think that'll
Yep.
help on traffic. But I would definitely, we're definitely going to send a email off to the show organizers and basically say, hey, your traffic sucked, or was significantly down.
Yeah.
They have to understand too. Vendors go to meet customers and want an opportunity. They had no like 4 o'clock hors d'oeuvres or wine or anything like that. They had no event in the afternoon to draw people in to the exhibit hall, which most vendors do, or what most show organizers. And I understand it's a Christian related event, but Christians still drink alcohol. They still drink beer and wine, and they don't. That doesn't make them any different from that perspective. But maybe the show just doesn't do that. I don't know, but they could have had something to help the volume of traffic. Now,
Yeah.
the folks that, at least the feedback I got back from Barry and Angelo, who manned our booth, was that there was probably 5 or 6 people that we talked to that will pay for the show and more.
Yeah.
So there was a hint, those are, those big enterprise clients that you want. And then the opportunity, obviously, to reach folks that are considering. Believe it or not, a huge number of people know us strictly because of PowerPress. So that is, that helps us out too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, there's large organizations there that participate in that event that have outreach, Christian outreach that spans the globe, and they have people scattered all over the place in various countries all around the world, and they're creating content for each of those countries. So there are quite large networks that exist in that genre that can have hundreds of podcasts potentially just off of one group of evangelizing Christians.
right.
If you want to put it clearly, what it is, that's what that organization is about, is spreading the word of God. So
And there was a lot of groups there, regular, so you've got the, big name um, radio networks,
like
uh,
Salem
right,
and yeah,
that have more than Christian content. So
yes,
they have a, full breadth of content. So those are the type of folks that, make very good enterprise clients. So it,
yeah,
that is, one of the reasons we go to the event, but primarily we go for the small churches that are there. They're looking to, do a
yeah.
podcast to reach their congregation. But anyway, yeah,
And there's thousands and thousands of those,
right, right.
and there's just a small fraction that are actually doing podcasts today.
And which just seems insane, really, if you think about how many active.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure,
but it's a technical knowledge thing, and it's a budget thing. It's
true.
an understanding thing. I mean, a lot of them have mixers and microphones and
Yep,
production capability right now. That they're just not funneling it
right.
oftentimes in our direction yet because they don't understand it. They don't know how to do it, and that's what you spend a lot of time doing at that conference
Yep.
is educating. And it's one of the things that I know that Rob Walsh has been working on, and I did as well last year, is trying to work with the kind of the executive team of the NRB to try and encourage them to have a stronger set of panels and content for the conference around podcasting.
But they didn't, did they?
They they had one session that had a couple people that were in there that were the moderator of the panel has a pretty successful faith-based podcast,
Mm,
so she was good, but they're not people that have a reputation in the podcasting space
mm,
and have or that represent any kind of a publishing platform that can bring some expertise
mm-hmm.
to a panel session. So that's the thing that doesn't yet exist at that conference yet.
Well, overall, we've been busy, or you have, and
You have to.
I got a break though. I got to come home. I've been home since Tuesday. You got home
Yeah,
last night, so
yeah. Two. It's the first time I've ever done two back-to-back conferences.
what'd you do in between? Did you go to Disneyland, or what'd you do the 2 days you were off?
We went out to NASA and went
Oh,
out, looked out there, and then also we spent part of the day looking for the biggest crocodile we could find.
oh,
So we
okay.
went croc looking.
At some like croc tour place where they do croc wrestling, and did you really go Florida style?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
all the way. The looking in every pond. As you're driving down the road, looking for the crocodiles in the ponds.
are you serious? You just didn't go
Uh,
to a croc museum or something? They have them all over.
we we did go to a couple, but we weren't as enthused about seeing them in
Oh, captivity.
a caged environment. Yes, because they tended to be very lazy, so they were
Right.
like laying around all the
Yeah,
time.
because they've been fed.
That's
They
yeah.
get their chicken every day instead of a human.
So
Um,
so we wanted to go to where the crocodiles were in their natural
oh,
habitat,
so
where they could consider consuming us, which would make that they would be more likely to move more.
well, you
No,
have
just
to,
kidding.
if you go down into the Everglades a little bit, you'll have as equal of an opportunity to run into a python as you would a
Yes,
crocodile. So,
yes.
the only good snake is a dead snake. So
It probably applies to a crocodile. It's about to eat you
well, I'm
too,
not going to
right?
get close enough to kill one. So, but Anyway, they eat good. Yeah, I had some crocodile nuggets. So
Did
that
you now?
yeah, I
Wow.
did. Yep. So
Payback's a bitch.
yeah, the um the uh the three I had some awesome couple of awesome meals and I had a couple of crappy meals. So it was kind of a mixed bag down there on food. They're
Yeah.
used to dealing with tourists, so we got
Yeah.
sucked up into the fish place we went. Oh my God, was it good?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It's feast or famine down there. I'll tell you when it comes to
yeah.
food quality. Yeah.
Grouper's ugly fish, but I had the best grouper that I've ever had in my life, and down there in Orlando. It was just exquisite. But I don't know. It was a good trip, and I guess we'll be back next year. I know I'm going to be back next year for a wedding. Same exact weekend. I'll be giving my daughter away. So
Wow.
we'll see what happens if the PodFest is on the same weekend. I probably won't be there, but um, we had a good time.
Yeah.
But
That was a good trip.
I
Good
came
trip.
back. I came back to absolutely downpour flooding here in Hawaii. It's just been crazy. So don't have to worry about water in my yard for a month. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I brought back the sun to Seattle, so
oh, good.
it's good. It's good.
So
So
there's a lot other happening. I mean, we've just scratched the surface on stuff that's going on. I mean, there's a huge amount of news. I,
yeah,
I mean, it's like um,
we could
there
do a
was
3-hour show, Todd.
yeah, there was a talk about the Rain Summit. Lots of article about the iPhone. The phone is the new radio. Stuff from the UK. It's lots of move. Even news out of Nepal on a Indian-based. I guess that's correct. And is Nepal in India?
Yeah. Well,
No, I'm.
Nepal is Nepal,
Oh,
so I
okay.
think it's its own country. I think
I'm stupid.
it's next to China.
Okay, yeah, I'm an idiot. So, um,
That's fine.
um, and of course, lots of announcements, some stuff that happened with, let's see here, Vox Media and names its first executive producer for audio.
Mhm.
There was an announcement by AdLarge partnering with Panoply, the Megaphone platform.
Mhm.
There's the I think it's the NPR is doing a new campaign urging you to tell your friends about podcasts. All this stuff can be found on podpod.com. Get subscribed to
Yep.
their newsletter over there. And I got to meet the other half of the Pod to Pod team. Um, so that was cool.
That's great.
He was at PodFest, but lots and lots of news going on. Anything else that comes top of mind that we've missed, Rob?
There's a bunch of articles out that came out last week about live podcasts,
Oh, yep.
which may not be what you think it is. It's live on stage
Oh,
show productions. So when they use the word live, they're not necessarily saying live streaming. They're saying just live on stage productions. Seems to be growing in its importance. It's a way to sell tickets. Is what it comes down to.
yeah.
People can make money off of going and doing your podcast in front of a live audience is what it really means.
Well, we've done that, and never charged for it, have we, Rob? We
I know. Jeez.
yeah, we should.
What were we thinking?
Next time we do one of those, we have an event, or we're going to have to get. Maybe we can just do a volunteer thing. We'll pass the hat and see if we can take up a collection. I'm sure we'll get 50 cents or a buck or two in there. So,
Yes, that's true. I'm sure we can at least get 50 cents or a buck.
and if we go to New York, we could rent a theater out, and I'm sure we would probably go broke doing it because no one would come.
Yeah, exactly. Why should they come? They can just listen to us here.
Right, and watch us here. By
Yeah,
the way, we've had a
exactly.
pretty good group on the live stream today on YouTube. So the YouTube numbers have been up. So
That's
lots of
good.
people are watching on YouTube. We are at facebook.com/Cochrane, where you can come over and be part of the peanut gallery and feed us information over
Yeah,
there too. So, but I think we're about new media showed out this morning. But
I think so. I think we've tapped our potential.
so a couple of guests have expressed interest in coming on the show. So we'll have some announcements about that. Don't know if it's going to be next week, but who knows? After this, maybe the Omni folks will stick their head out and want to come on.
I know Rob Walsh is done with his coaching,
Oh.
so he's going to be able to come on here in the next couple of weeks. And we did actually talk to Dan Franks, who's going to join us at some point here
Right.
to talk about podcast movement and
it's
other stuff.
So they've the podcast movement folks have opened nominations for the Hall of Fame. And I've got a couple of people that I think would be good people to nominate for the Hall of Fame. So if you want to get on my bandwagon and help out and co-nominate a couple of people, drop me a line, and I'll be willing to share who I think are deserving. But I'm sure there's probably going to be about 100 people that are going to be submitted. But the requirement is the person has to have at least 10 years in the podcasting space. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be active, but someone...
That cuts the list down pretty quick.
Yeah, it does. So, but there's still a lot of good folks that are active and not active in the space that have been in the space at least 10 years too. So, and that list is going to get bigger as time goes on. So,
that's true.
And they're only inducting 5 or 6 people a year. So, it's going to take a while to get through. I don't know, I guess I don't fully. They're having public nominations and full members of the Academy, I guess, get to vote. I'm a little leery on that. I'll probably vote this year. I haven't voted in years past, but anyway, that does it for us. Rob, where they can reach you?
Rob at robgreenlee.com is a great place to email. On Twitter at robgreenlee, and that's with 2 E's. And those are the best places. So I'm going to be doing a Speaker Live show next Wednesday. So I'm sure there'll be some more discussion about PodFest and what happened at Proclaim17. So NRB.
Yep. And of course, you can reach me on Twitter at Geek News. You can, for my personal show, it's geeknews@gmail.com, or if you just want to reach me at Blueberry, it's todd@blueberry.com. So I'm sure we're going to get some feedback, and we'll see how if people actually take the time to listen, they'll understand our perspective. There's only so much you can do in a Facebook post.
Yeah.
And so reporters and podcasters, happy to talk to you about everything. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time here on the New Media Show. Again, subscribe. Tell your fellow podcasters about the show. Tell fellow reporters about the show. They can learn a lot by listening and ask relevant, we hope, educational questions. So everyone take care. We'll see you next time here on the New Media Show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.